I think it's pretty clear that Tecmo Super Bowl is the best NES football game. Just take one look at NFL by LJN and you'll see what I mean. Play action football also looks really bad in comparison. Now, the original Tecmo Bowl is fun, but it isn't even half the game that Tecmo Super Bowl is. This game is fantastic, and it really is one of the greatest football games of all time. In fact, I think that it's actually much better than the Madden and the Montana games that came out on the 16-bit systems that year and the years afterwards. But you know, that's a topic for another video. What I really want to talk about today is whether Tecmo Super Bowl is the best game on the NES all around. And I know that those are fighting words, so first hear me out. Okay, I'm going to base this video on this random Reddit post that I found from a couple years back. And yeah, I know that there are crazy good games out there like Mario 3, and yeah, I played this game a ton when I was a kid. Yes, I know all about the first Zelda and all the other classics. And yes, I know that a lot of the video game geeks are going to get really upset when I say that a sports game is better than all of these other games. So, you know, if you're James Rolfe or Mike Matei or whatever, you can flame me in the comment section all you want, go ahead. But let's seriously take a look at these arguments and see if they hold any merit. Is Tecmo Super Bowl the best game on the NES? Okay, so this random Redditor's first point is that this is a great game, both single player and multiplayer. Now, you know that I spend all of my time playing this game single player, so I might not be the best person to consult on this front. The thing is, though, that The Legend of Zelda is only a one-player game. The Mario games can be played two-player, but for the most part, not simultaneously, and yeah, I know about the thing in Mario 3 where you, like, jump on each other's heads or whatever. And I mean, the other great two-player games are going to be things like, you know, Tengen Tetris or, like, Bomberman or something like that. Tecmo Super Bowl is a fantastic two-player game, and it arguably can keep pace with all of those other games despite the fact that it's a sports game. And I honestly think it's one of the best two-player sports experiences on the console. So when I was a kid, my friends and I, we would play Tecmo Super Bowl and RBI baseball games like that two-player. There were other sports games that could do that as well, but these games tended to feel the most competitive and the most interesting, especially since different teams had different strengths and weaknesses. You could kind of make up your own handicap system if you needed to. Now, the second argument here is that this is the sort of game that can be played quickly and yet also has a ton of depth. I can attest to this. It takes me maybe 20 minutes max to play a single game of Tecmo Super Bowl. Compare that to the first Madden game on Genesis, which takes almost an hour to get through and which is really tedious. Sure, you can sit down and hammer out Super Mario Bros. Pretty quick, but the thing is that you're getting the same experience with the game every single time. Tecmo Super Bowl is rare in that it will give you a different experience every time you play it, which is something that you just don't see in action games. And like most RPGs, Tecmo Super Bowl gives you this immersive experience where you can make changes to your team, but more on that later. So the best way to think about Tecmo Super Bowl is kind of like a sort of sports RPG, and there's only one other NES sports game that has that, by the way, but I'm going to talk about that one at the end of this video. Now, the third point that this random guy brought up is similar to the second one, which is that this game is really easy to learn. Tecmo Super Bowl is one of the easiest NES games to learn how to play. The play calling system is easy to figure out, and the defensive system is basically just guessing the offense's plays. It's easy to figure out how to change the guy you want to pass to. Of course, it's not always easy to get the pass off if you're facing a defensive rush. And even though you can go really deep into the game, the basics of how to play it still stay the same regardless of your skill level. In other words, this isn't a game that's like, like Street Fighter 2 or Killer Instinct or Super Smash Bros. Or whatever, where you have an advantage if you've played the game a ton, you have all the moves memorized or whatever. You're still going to struggle with a bad team in Tecmo Super Bowl even if you are a super inexperienced player. And you will use basically the same approach to this game whether you're really good at the game or really bad at the game. So moving on with that RPG comparison, the fourth point is that you can change your parties around a ton, and you're going to be forced to do so, especially when guys get injured. Now, I know you can do a bunch of stuff with the parties in games like Final Fantasy, sure, but in Tecmo Super Bowl, you can make these changes before every single game if you really want to. And it actually makes a major difference when you play the game, arguably more of a difference here than it does in most RPGs. In other words, Tecmo Super Bowl actually gives you more reasons to experiment and to mess around than the majority of RPGs on the NES or the Super NES or the PlayStation. I could go on. There's actually real depth to this game. Every team has its strengths and weaknesses, and if you think that you're hot stuff because you won everything with like the 49ers, you can then try to beat the game as like the Colts. This is why people still play this game to this day. There's just a whole ton of depth. Tecmo Super Bowl is also fascinating because of the injuries. Injuries in this game make a huge difference. They force you to change your party around in a way that no other RPG that I know of forces you. And this means you need to have a comprehensive game plan to deal with different situations. So someone in the comments, I don't know if it was on this channel or some other channel, I forget. Someone though was complaining to me about how there were injuries in some other sports game, and I might have been a Madden game, I can't remember. The thing the old Madden games got wrong was that you didn't have to do anything once your guys got injured. The game just like did it for you. In Tecmo Super Bowl, you have to solve the problem yourself, which is key. That's immersive, right? That's really engaging. That's the thing that gets people to think a lot about this game. It's a simple thing, yeah, but it really is powerful. And finally, there are a lot of stats. The existence of these stats alone makes Tecmo Super Bowl a lot better than most of the 16-bit football games. In Madden 94, for example, you can only look at the standings. The game can't actually save stats. Don't ask me why an 8-bit game for a supposedly dead system had better capabilities than a freaking brand new and overhyped 16-bit game. And of course, most of your old RPGs don't really have any meaningful stat systems. I'm not talking about like attributes for characters and stuff. I'm talking about like looking back and seeing like, well, how many times did this character get a hit? How many times was it a miss? Stuff like that. Now, the cool thing about Tecmo Super Bowl is that you can try to like go for all these really nutty statistical challenges if you really think you're hot stuff at the game. Set like a record for touchdowns using a quarterback that really sucks, that sort of thing. Anyway, there are a few arguments as well that this dude did not bring up that kind of go against Tecmo Super Bowl, and for the sake of argument, I do want to bring them up here at the end. The biggest one is the defensive system. It's fun to guess the other team's plays, sure, but this isn't a great way to make defense in a football game. Now, the defensive system in something like the early Madden games isn't exactly perfect. But at least this gives you the general illusion of playing defense. Now, I would argue that the defensive system is probably the biggest strike against Tecmo Super Bowl, and this is probably the reason why gaming magazines weren't fawning over this game when it first came out. There are a few other minor things that are wrong too, however. For instance, you can't get a touchback on a kickoff. Punts almost always go for touchbacks because of a glitch in the game. And you can't do fake punts or field goals like you can in the 16-bit games.
It's a fake. He goes nowhere. Brings up 4th down and 26.
But like I said, those three things are really, really minor points, especially in the grander scheme of things. Like, there's also problems like there are no penalties and stuff. Most of us think, though, that that's kind of an advantage because penalties suck. Anyway, I still think that Tecmo Super Bowl is probably the best NES game out there because of that combination of great arcade gameplay and RPG style depth. But there is one game that gives it a run for its money. Baseball Stars is the undisputed king of NES baseball games. Now, it doesn't seem like much at first. However, when you get into its player development system, you'll realize that there's a lot more here than meets the eye. You can customize your players and have them grow the way that you want them to grow. And once again, each game takes maybe 25 minutes to play tops. You can play a whole season pretty quickly. In my opinion, Baseball Stars is the only other NES game with the sort of clout that Tecmo Super Bowl has. Anyway, what do you guys think? Like, are these the best NES games, period? Are there NES games that are better than these two that I've forgotten about or that I've ignored? Do you give the edge to Tecmo Super Bowl because it has more like real life players and teams? Or do you give the edge to Baseball Stars because it's completely customizable? Let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. Let's get the debate going.